Welcome, everyone. Thank you very much for being here in another event organized by the European Liberal Forum, this time in cooperation jointly with the German Economic Institute. This time today, we are talking about data economy. Data is, becoming more and more a fundamental element of our society, performing many functions in society, public administration, economy, even international relations. So it's a fundamental aspect of our lives. We are part of it. We are also data. When we are uploading ourselves and our personal preferences, we become data online. And it's a matter that it is of concern for everyone. It's not only a technical issue. So it is, of course, a technical issue. It should be handled by experts, but it is, one of those rare cases where a very technical issue is concerning every single person who participates in the data economy and the digital environment in any function. So, as we have been talking about digitalization more than usual in the past 2 years because of COVID, and we are realizing that this data economy, the information revolution, the network society is a real thing. It's not a philosophical concept anymore. It's something that is truly defining our lives. And we realize more and more that this is a new space, this is a new domain that needs to be regulated, but also harnessed. So we are sure that we make the most out of it, the most out of this brave new world. And as with every single transition, this digital transition is, difficult. It is creating a lot of tensions. It is creating tensions between privacy and transparency. It is creating tensions between regulation, the need for regulation, and the need for innovation, and the need for growth, and the need for creating new business models, and so on. It is creating a tension between policymakers, perhaps, and the industry, but this is all healthy. This is all healthy, especially within the context of the European Union. It is healthy, and it is fundamental in helping us and facilitating the development of policy solutions that fit the new world, the new digital world. So I'm very happy to be welcoming here today our distinguished speakers. I will not waste any more time, and I will introduce first Siada El Ramli, who is the Director General at Europe, Dr. Vera De Mari, who is the Head of Digitalization Research at German Economic Institute, and Federico Milani, who is the Deputy Head of the Data Policy and Innovation Unit in the DG Connect at the European Commission. And I will start with the opening remarks in the opposite way, starting with Federico, who came last. Federico, you work for the European Commission, and the unit is Data Policy and Innovation. So I think it's a perfect way to start by saying, what is your unit doing to make the EU ready for the data economy? Is it already? Do we need to do more things? What are you doing? Let us know.
So when I got the question, I was wondering, how do I answer to the question? Because if I answer yes, Europe is ready for the data economy, you immediately will ask the Commission and myself, so why are you doing all these initiatives, legislation, regulations to support the data economy? If I'm saying no, it's not ready, then I might give the wrong impression that no matter what the Europe is doing, we will not be able to compete with the other major players in the data economy. So actually, I think that the best answer is the answer of my Commissioner Breton, that when he arrived and he got the mandate for this new commission, he said, well, Europe has got all the means and tools to become a major player in the data economy. Especially when we are talking about the new revolution that is coming up, as you were mentioning, on the use of data in the industrial sector. We've got a strong industries, and what he wants and we want to do is to promote the use of data in the industrial sector, and make sure that really Europe becomes a leader in the use of data in the industrial sector, favoring as well the digital transitions that we are all seeing happening in the world. So how do we plan, or how do we promote this? Well, the first thing that we've done was the publication of the communication on a data strategy for Europe, where we announced a number of initiatives in order to support really this transition and move towards a data economy. What we have identified, for example, there are a number of issues and barriers that limit the sharing of the data and the use of data. We don't have major concentration in Europe of data. So one major aspect that we need to have in order to really get the data economy is get the data, make possible that the data is shared between the various data providers and data users. But that all has to come and has to be made respecting what we call the European values. So as you were mentioning, respecting of data protections, data protection of personal data, but also protection of confidential data in the industrial sectors, so that if someone is sharing their data, they know that data will not be used against them for example, doing reaching a competitive gap using the data of the competitors. So in this perspective, what we've done is launch a number of initiatives to finance, for example, data sharing and the creation of data spaces, but also legal instruments. The first one that we've launched, and where we are extremely proud that because there has been already reached a political agreement between the European Parliament and the Council, is the regulation called Data Governance Act, where we are going to promote, and what we are trying to do there is ensure really trust in data transaction. And there what we've done is to promote this new figure of data intermediaries and service providers, data intermediaries, to promote the concept of data altruism and the creation of this data altruism organization when there is the voluntary the willingness of sharing data. And then what we have done is a number of other initiatives, even if they are not under the responsibility of our of my unit, as for example the Digital Market Act, where what we are trying to tackle is the imbalances caused by the market power of the gatekeepers, so the major companies that holds the data. And what we want to be there to make sure is that also other small medium enterprises will have the possibility of getting access to their data that is being held by the major player in the digital sphere. And now what we are working is in the final instruments that has been announced in the data strategy, which is the Data Act, where we are looking again, and one of the major aspects that many SMEs has told us, and many industry, European industry has told us, which is the possibility of getting access of data, IoT data, so smart, data produced by smart devices. Or what we are looking also is the possibility of switching cloud services, and then also the issues and aspect of standards. So again, there what we are doing is trying to ensure the fairness in the allocation of data value among the various actors. So there is a vast amount of well, there is quite a lot of actions that we are trying to do in order to open up the market without, as you were saying, placing too many regulation or too many limits to the innovation, but actually promoting innovation by making sure that when the data is shared between the various organizations in a trusted manner, and that the value of the data can be shared and can be exploited to the maximum. Together with that, we are also putting our money, let's put it in this way, because we are going to fund a number of data spaces to create this environment where to share data in several sectors, some industrial sectors, some other sectors that are more strategic and that are more focusing on social aspects of our life. And there are 10 data spaces that are all mentioned in the data strategy, but there are others that are coming up and that has been announced in these 2 years. So we are really trying to push and make sure that Europe will have an environment where there are clear rules on how to share data, because what we know is also that when there is uncertainty, people tend not to share data, and there are the possibility of making of exploiting to the maximum the data. And with that one, I stop and I give it back the word to you, Antonio.
Thank you very much, Federico. I believe this was a very fair reply, a very fair answer to the question, and I appreciate it. So I can see that, I mean, you didn't have to say anything. We've all have seen that the Commission is taking so many initiatives. As I said, to some extent, this is necessary and expected. Should we expect, because this is the feeling that we get, should we expect that the EU is going to try and use how is it called, the Brussels effect in order to become a benchmark for the data economy in the same way that it's become a benchmark for with the GDPR? And even more importantly, are all those initiatives compatible with each other? Are we working on that? So this is the follow-up question, please.
Yeah, they are quite interesting questions. Yes, what we hope is exactly what you are saying, that as with the GDPR, it will serve as the basis also for others to join in. And we know that a number of topics that we are tackling and that we are with our legislation are also topics, barriers, problems that are seen also in other countries. So yeah, we hope that there will be the same effect. Are they all compatible? This is another major question that we are dealing internally before even to get our proposal adopted. And yes, we are all the proposals are done in a very collegial way, so that, for example, the GDPR is one of our cornerstone, and it's always kept in mind and fully respected. So all the other initiatives that we are adopting keep in mind the basic principle of the GDPR. And there we want to make sure, because really the GDPR has become one of our example of how, which are the values that in Europe we want to respect and that we want to follow.
Great, thank you, Federico. I have the feeling that we will return to this question of the EU becoming a leader in data protection once again after the GDPR, and how this can be, you know, how this can work with other strategic considerations. That's the feeling that I get. But let's go to Vera after this. Vera, you are the head of the research unit at the German Economic Institute that is called Structural Change and Competition since 2015. I mean, talking about structural change, of course, digitalization is number one. Sustainability is the second, of course, but yeah, the twin transition in the EU. How do you see this structural change when it comes to data economy? And in order to tweak a little bit the question, because after Federico's very fair remarks, is the EU becoming ready for data economy?
Thank you very much, Antonio. Yeah, obviously, structural change, but the structural change that we're facing is immense. The data economy is just one major part, but coming to your second question right away, I think we need to be ready. Obviously, we're not, otherwise we wouldn't be doing all these things. But we need to be ready, and we need to pick up speed. And I think that's a very important point. What we've been doing quite a lot, and what I want to talk about a little bit in the next couple of minutes, is how companies are dealing with this and how data-ready companies in Europe really are. Data economy readiness in that sense means that a company is able to manage data, to store data, to process data, to share data with other companies or the government, as the different EU initiatives suggest. What we did is we did a survey of about 1,000 companies in Germany from industry and industry-related services in late 2021, asking them about different aspects of digitalization. And we determined that 29% of these companies in our sample achieved a high or medium level of data economy readiness, which is not bad. So these 29% are technically able to participate in a data economy. But what this also means is that 71% are not. So these are the ones that are unable to work with their data. Some of them don't even store data digitally. So we have a lot of companies, and this is industry and industry-related services. So these are the companies that we're talking about when we're saying Europe has a competitive advantage in non-personal data. So 71% of them are not that far. And these are German companies, but I believe, I'm not aware of any numbers for other European countries, but I believe there's no reason why this should be an exception, why this should be any different in other member states. So we need to improve companies' ability to participate in a data economy, to harvest the promise that data makes. The main obstacle the companies in our survey named were legal obstacles. So 2/3 of the respondents said the main issues are legal and not economical or technological or organizational obstacles that they face. So what the EU is doing right now, trying to improve legal certainty for companies, in particular for SMEs, is good, is a positive thing, but it's also very complex. And this is something that Federico also said. We need to be careful not to stifle innovation with this. We need to walk the fine line between improving legal certainty for companies when they're dealing with data, when they're sharing data, and on the other hand, opening the market and trying to get them to be innovative, to be competitive on a global scale. So and the fine line that I was talking about is the reason why it's so difficult to gain companies' trust in the framework conditions that we have. And this is one point that I think is very important. We need trust for data sharing, and trust is at the center of all the data sharing initiatives. There is trust in the legislative framework, trust in its enforcement, and also trust in the security and the sovereignty of data. So I think this is what we need to work on. We need trust, and we need to create this to be able to make this all work and to actually achieve a European data economy. And at that point, I'm just gonna stop right here, and I'm happy to talk about this further today. I'm looking forward to it.
Thank you very much. Yes, this is a fantastic remark, I think, about trust. It's something that sometimes it is implicit in the discussion, but not emphasized enough. So I'm really glad that you emphasize this in this discussion. So trust, it is fundamental for any market, any kind of market, old traditional markets to the digital economy. And it takes, in this case, more than two to tango. It takes governments and policymakers, it takes companies, and it also takes citizens. I don't know if you have concrete data in your hand or concrete research in your hand, but do you think, okay, we're talking about the EU, is it ready? We're talking about the companies that you just mentioned that they're not ready, they want to become ready, and they're missing the legal certainty. How about citizens? Are they data aware or data ready? Do you think that they really appreciate the fundamental changes in the way the society and the economy works? What is your take on this?
As usual, is part this and part that, right? So there's obviously a lot of citizens that are very aware, that make sure to read all the notes before installing an app and before giving away their data. And then there's some that don't, and then there's some that don't participate. So what we actually have, I think, is a digital divide between those that are very digital and those that are not. And obviously this is going to change over time, and it takes some time. What we need to do, coming back to my company perspective, because we need employees that are digitally savvy, we need to the competencies in the companies to be dealing with this change, because these are companies that have been around for decades and they need to undergo a fundamental transformation. So they need human resources, they need the human capital to be able to do this. So we need to start early. We need to start in schools and universities to educate people about this, to show them the ropes, to show them what's important. That there's a choice between who to give your data to if we're talking about personal data of every citizen. So I also think this is a major point, a major issue that we're facing, and that's not being seen enough, I think.
Thank you very much. I couldn't agree more. And there are all sorts of factors in this equation. It's generational, so age factors, it is cultural background factors, and ease of access to the internet, any kind of parameter there. It's a lot of data to process in order to make correct policy decisions. That's another element of our modern world. But thank you very much. And of course, I will go straight to Siada and ask, I mean, she's the person to ask this question in complementing, of course, the main theme of the discussion today. Is the EU becoming ready? And how is the industry doing? How are the business models doing? There must be some sort of structural change also in that sector. So Siada, the floor is yours.
Thanks, Antonius, and thank you all for having me today. So very happy to talk about it. I think, is the EU ready? I think let's start maybe with the Commission, because Federico gave us a really good insight into the objective of the Commission, but maybe from the industry perspective, how we've seen what the Commission has been doing and the efforts is not just a continuation or an extension of the legislation that was in the pipeline, but really, as you put it, Antonio, as a brave new world, a Commission that came in with a clear vision and an ambition to change things, to put in the framework in terms of regulatory framework that we need to make the data economy, to regulate online service providers. It was very clear as an objective right at the start of this commission, and that's exactly what has been happening. With all these framework pieces of legislation coming off the ground, we're creating the legal certainty for all involved as to how to tackle this area that has always been a situation of the technology is way ahead and legislation is trying to catch up. Now we're trying to get all these horizontal pieces off the ground that will create the framework, and then look into the verticals that need to complement it. And I think that has been a major ambition of the Commission, an ambitious approach of this Commission, and they're doing it. It's actually happening. These big pieces are actually getting through trilogues. The discussions are moving forward. So in that sense, I think it's a good starting point. It's something to congratulate the Commission about. I do think, though, there are still some areas of caution with regards to the legislative framework, mainly that we're not used to doing these very ambitious big pieces. So when we see some of the discussions around the framework pieces, they still, not when they're published by the Commission. Again, let me differentiate there. I think in terms of what the Commission does, I fully agree with Federico saying they do have a vision of how to create coherence across the different pieces. But what we see is in the discussions, there are so many different agendas coming on board that it kind of pulls it into the vertical area, which makes it lose sight of what the horizontal ambition is of getting the contours right. And I think that that's a caution that we need to mention, because if we now try to make it fit everything under the sun in these horizontal pieces, we're going to end up just delaying the process unnecessarily without getting this these leadership bits, if I can put it that way, these leadership pieces for the EU in terms of digital policy off the ground. Why is the GDPR one of the big defining moments? Because Europe was a front runner. Europe said, these are our values. Those who operate within the EU have to adapt to that, and this is how they'll need to operate, and otherwise they can't operate within the EU. And these are the core elements that need to be followed. And I think that that's, again, what I would hope that these pieces, we don't work on the DMA, but the DSA, the Data Act, the Data Governance Act, all of those bits will actually contribute. So I think we're off to a good start. But is the industry ready for it? I think there you've got a divide. You've got those who are ready to deal with the data processing possibilities today. And one of the questions that we had as part of our briefing is, can the industry manage the volume of data that's out there? I think, again, you have the players who have been doing data processing at a certain level, that yes, they can manage it. But what we've also seen, especially, and I hate using the pandemic for everything, because I think so many of us have used the pandemic as argumentation on so many different parts of our lives. But on this one,
and justification also, not only argumentation, also justification, an excuse for everything.
No, exactly. And I don't mean it that way, but I think what it's done is it's put the fast forward button in a lot of ways in terms of data economy. We've seen local restaurants having to straight away become data processors of what they're doing in terms of their client listing. We've seen, your corner shop not being able to maybe open their doors, but to actually reach their clientele, having to become an e-commerce operator. So what has that meant? It's just pushed different parts of the industry into a situation where they had to learn about legislation that they were never aware of, about what data sharing means, for example, what are the limitations and what are the possibilities in terms of data sharing, in terms of contracts, for example, B2B contracts. It's opened up a whole new gamut of possibilities, threats, and unknowns. And I think that that's where, to your question to Vera about awareness, I think that that's where we all, both from the public institutions, but also from the industry, need to kind of help in creating this awareness, because there are so many players involved. So I would say it's a mixed bag in terms of, are we ready? I don't know, I've covered a few of the areas that you wanted me to cover initially. One question was, do you think that there could be a model for the EU to follow going forward? And I think we shouldn't limit our aspirations to having a single model. I think that there are so many possibilities right now. I think we need to go using the rationale that the Commission has put in place of getting the contours right. I think we need to look at data sharing, and the data economy is creating enough flexibility to foster data exchange and data sharing, but knowing full well what data we're sharing, with whom, to what end, and within which context. So creating the safeguards that are needed. And then maybe as a closing remark, I think lots of opportunities ahead of us, but let's remember that the EU is a very big economy and one that is definitely got a massive footprint, but we're part of a global economy. And to do that, we should be inclusive, definitely set our values at the front run of it, but remember that we need to be inclusive as opposed to being exclusive.
Thank you very much. Well, you preempted my follow-up question, and I had to very quickly find another one, but you saved me. You saved me in the end when you said that we need to be inclusive, because I was thinking, we're talking about the cyberspace, which, well, it's the habitat of the data, let's say, and it is naturally a place without borders, naturally. Although we have seen also borders being erected in cyberspace. The actors that operate in cyberspace, and of course I'm talking about both citizens and industry, they have a tendency to see it like this vast open space that should have no boundaries, and so on. And especially when we're talking about various actors from various sectors working together in order to make this data economy work, I would expect, and this is the question, if you can also give us this inside information, that the players, the industry, the businesses would feel limited, circumscribed by, creating all sorts of boundaries around their operations online. And if you think that there is, a natural willingness, however, to cooperate, despite the fact that this is an initiative from the Commission. It's not a multilateral thing. It is an initiative with specific political aims and so on. What is the sentiment? And the businesses also from your organization are not only European, so they are already. So this and I will make it very, very clear. The industry is already working together in the context of this economy, although international actors and states are not always working together. So what is the dynamic there? What is the feeling? What can you tell us about?
Yeah, I think we've seen a major shift in recent years from an industry that was always looking whether the legislation would apply to them or whether they had a unique standing within a certain context, to an industry that has said we need guidance. We need to understand what those contours are. We need to understand what our legislative framework is in which we operate, what legal certainty can be provided. So I think that's been a major shift recently over the past, I would say probably the past 5 years to a decade, where we've seen the industry really asking for, give us the guidelines. We've been left in a way to try and adapt the offline rules to the online setting, and it doesn't always fit. So what do we do? And as I started, the Commission has taken on that challenge to create that. I think That said, what is going to be quite important is to see that we don't get clashes in the final products of the different pieces of legislation between the obligations that have, for example, been set out in the platform to business regulation or some of the consumer pieces versus the DSA. We need to make sure that now, even though we desperately want to get these pieces of legislation off the ground, have we got realistic timelines in terms of transposition timelines, both for industry to be able to adapt their business processes to comply, but also in terms of the institutions and the governments to be able to accommodate it. Look at the DSA, for example, that seems a lot of different oversight bodies coming in that never existed before. How are the DSCs actually going to be created, and how are they going to start operating? Where do you find these experts? You can't do that from within 6 months, which is some of the suggestions are to have a transposition period of 6 months. We need to be realistic as to what is achievable, and I think that now let's go all the way out in setting the right guidelines, but let's make sure it can be a success, and that's from the industry perspective as well as from the policymakers.
Great. Thank you very much. I mean, the discussion can go in many different directions now, but we have finished the first part of the initial interventions from our speakers, and then we will go into a proper dialogue. First, I would like to ask our audience, our considerable audience, to participate with questions. So please type them in the chat. Help me out a little bit here, and I will put them to the speakers. So please go ahead and do that. And to the speakers, to say that I will ask some more questions, but feel free to intervene at any point, ask for the floor, or also put questions of your own to your fellow speakers. So one thing that was very interesting for me, it was that it is confirmed that GDPR is like a sort of a benchmark, a success story that is trying to be replicated. And without being an expert on data privacy or an expert on GDPR, for that matter, although I am aware, the question is, so what kind of success can we, what kind of lessons can we take from the GDPR? Federico, first and foremost, what is the inside discussion, debate about that? Because in my mind, the GDPR was something very limited. It was only data privacy. It was only concerning one direction of data flow from the citizens to the companies, and it was regulated in this way. What are your thoughts on this?
Well, I'm not an expert either on the GDPR, but what we are trying to do with all this regulation and with all these initiatives is really try to keep a balance. And when you are tackling horizontal issues, as I was mentioning, you need to be careful, and sometimes you cannot. There are a number of organizations that would like the Commission to go even further and try to get more actions, but finding the right balance in order not to disrupt too much and act, for example, on the innovations and in a negative way, it's rather difficult. So for the GDPR, for example, what we've seen, it was told, and still some other organization believes that it has put quite an overhead in order to respond and to be to comply to the GDPR. But on the other hand, if you are a citizen, I think that for the people that knows what the GDPR means, they've got an assurance that now their data is treated in a proper manner, or in a better manner than what it was treated before the GDPR came in. There is, again, as it was said before, a long period also of the people and the citizens to understand, to all of us, to understand and to get the digital skills and the skills of data to understand what it means, this new economy and this new way of dealing and the importance of data. But that one will come. It's difficult, of course, and as Yada was mentioning, there are so many parties involved also in the drafting of the legislation, in the adoption of the in the adoption of the legislation after that the Commission has adopted. So that it's extremely difficult to get really to respond to all the needs and requirements and to keep the right balance. So the GDPR showed us that it didn't stop, as many were saying, innovation, but actually to have the security and the possibility of knowing which are the rules to treat the personal data, it gives more security also to the companies on how they can use the data and they can treat the data. And this is what we are trying to achieve also with the other initiatives. So put a baseline that where the companies and the industries and citizens will know how to use the data, and create what it was said also before, trust between the various parties.
Thank you, Federico. Any one of the two speakers want to react, please?
Yeah, I'm happy to jump in there for a second. I think you're right, Antonius, that it was quite limited in terms of what kind of data it was addressing, but it hit right at the core of where the concerns was. If we were going to go, at the time, if we're going to go on the basis of the trust agenda, the concerns were as to how do you gain trust from all these millions of users of services where there was a data exchange. It was very personal data. It was sometimes very sensitive data. And how do you deal with that? And how do you create a level of confidence, both in terms of the policy framework, but also in terms of what the services actually have to comply with? And I think that that's what made the GDPR so different. So yes, it was focused on personal data, but it hit right at the core of where the agenda had to go. And that's what made the EU such a front runner then. We also saw different parts of the world trying to duplicate the GDPR without some of the issues, like, for example, the core European values on which it's based. And that's where you need to see it within the European context, as opposed to it just being a very long piece of legislation that can be cut and pasted into another context, because it won't necessarily work in that way. And we've seen that sadly happen in different circumstances in different countries. But I do think it's kind of led the way in how to deal with personal data, how the industry has to deal with it. And I think Federico mentioned it, where there are so many players, and it doesn't mean that everybody leaves the negotiating table feeling comfortable with the result. I'm known for saying everybody has to leave slightly uncomfortable with the end result to know that we've done a good job, because otherwise there'll always be
a negotiation. Otherwise, it's not a negotiation.
Exactly.
Right. Okay. And Vera, maybe a reaction?
Yeah, I must say I read the question that was posted in the Q&As, and I'm gonna connect the two, I think, because the question was not to take that away from you, but is it politically desirable to pursue the objective of an international legal standard setter? Is this the main ambition we have? And I think this is something I wanted to add on. I think the main goal is not to be the standard setter, and the main goal is not to be the front runner, but the main goal is to achieve a framework for Europe that works for us and that tackles these new challenges. But at the same time, and I think this has become an increasingly a topic in debates as well, is nowadays there's a geopolitical perspective as well. We're not alone. We're in a triangle between the US and China, and they're both regulating in different ways, sometimes similar, but often very different. And I think this is an opportunity for the EU to become a front runner once more, not because it's the main goal, but as a side effect that is important though, because the geopolitical aspects, the competition between the three geopolitical areas is something that's really hard to deal with. And one way we can make it easier for us and for the European companies is if we set the framework right and companies are competitive within the European Union. So I think this is sort of the connects both questions, I think.
And I think that this works perfectly well. So please, the audience, put on some more questions there, because as you've seen, it was very much streamlined into the discussion. Okay, well, I can make this question a little bit more difficult for everyone. Starting with Vera, since you brought up the broader geopolitical context. The question is that data economy is very particular in many ways. One of these is that there are a lot, I don't know, millions of players in the market, but there are a few very big players in the market, and most of those big players are not in Europe. And the question then is not if it's politically desirable, which we would say very easily, yes, why not, if you can become the leader and start setting the standards, but if it is even feasible.
Do you mean if it is feasible to become the leader of the standard setter with legislation?
Yes, but without having, you know, big players to support and immediately implement the standards. So there needs to be some sort of balance between or negotiation again between the different players. But Europe is liking, let's say, the big players in the industry to justify a leadership position in setting the standards.
I don't see it like that. I think the dynamics of the digital economy overall show that leadership can quickly change in the company sphere, and I think it's not important where the companies are from that are leaders in these areas right now, but I think the question is more of where they're active, and if they affect European consumers, if they affect European businesses, then why shouldn't we be the leaders? We're a big market, as Yada said that earlier. So I think that's not an excuse, I think. And I like the positive outlook of saying the companies that we're talking about, without mentioning their names, they're dealing mostly with personal data. And I think the outlook is pretty positive if we're looking at non-personal data and the strong industry that we have here in Europe and the massive amounts of data that they have, and that they're not harvesting right or completely yet. So I think we can become big players too, and I think the rules need to be there for everyone, independently from where they're from, if they want to do business with Europe.
Thank you. I'm pretty sure that Siada and Federico want to come in as well. Siada, since you have the hand there, it's all yours, and then Federico, you can prepare.
Thanks, Antonius. Yeah, indeed. So I think to Vera's point, if you're operating in Europe, you're a European player. You might not originate in Europe, but you have to comply with the legislation in Europe. You have to comply with the European values that underpin that legislation, and that's regardless of where your origin is. I also think that on the one hand, no, setting global standards shouldn't be our ambition. It should be getting our policy right for the EU, because that's what we're working on. But if it translates, because we're part of a global economy to other parts of the world, you see that in the content space, for example, Europe was the front runner on looking at some of the areas in terms of content moderation, and traveled much quicker to some of the other areas in the world, like Australia, like Brazil, like India, with mixed results. But in that sense, we aren't on our own. We're not an island on our own. And so I don't think that should be our core objective, but at the same time, we should get it right for here. And I don't necessarily think that I'm glad that we're not always just talking about where's the next big European player. We have some very solid, innovative companies in the EU that we need to foster, and we need to foster to grow further. But that it shouldn't just be to duplicate the trajectory that some of the other global players have had.
I can understand that. Thank you very much, Federico.
Yeah, I want to repeat what Sede was saying, and which is also the mantra of my commissioner, Breton, which says Europe is open to everybody that wants to make business in Europe, that wants to get access to one of the biggest market. Because if you take it as a whole, the European Union is one of the biggest consumer market, but they have to play with our own, with the EU rules and respect the EU values. And this is what we are doing. This is what we've done with the GDPR, and we've seen that even the biggest company, that has got almost a monopoly de facto in certain aspects, so what we call also gatekeepers, had to follow the GDPR, because of course, being the biggest market, one of the biggest market, they have to comply with what we require. And this is the approach that we want to continue also with the other aspect, not only with GDPR, but with the other aspects of the digital economy and data sharing in particular. And I think this is the approach that we should follow, because one of the major aspects that define the European Union is also the respect of certain values that we want to be respected also in making business and coming and working in and making business in Europe.
Thank you. Okay, well, continuing, since we don't have a question from the audience, no. Continuing on this broader geopolitical context, then. We have big players in the market from traditional allies and friends. We have big players in the market from countries that do not respect the same values as the European Union. They're very different from us. They're very different in the way that they are processing, storing, transmitting, and exploiting data. They have a different conception of or a different position on privacy, and so on. And so we are talking about strategic autonomy, building strategic autonomy, digital strategic autonomy for the European Union, and this is obviously part of it. And the question is, in practice, how do we find a balance between strategic and autonomy? Because those two things are not the same, obviously. We need to be able to act on our own, to have autonomy, but at the same time, we need to be strategic in thinking about autonomy. Strategic sometimes may mean that we have to cooperate with certain countries, we have to not cooperate with other countries. So in practice, in trying to set the standards, in trying to lead world regulation on data economy, how does it work, the cooperating with partners or competing with systemic rivals? What do you think? Anyone who would like to take the hot seat for this one? Siada?
Again, I think that we need to focus on getting it right for our European citizens first and our European businesses first, and make sure that we're complying to what the standards are in the EU. And then in our negotiations with other partners, we at times industry does have to comply with different contexts, but it's just making sure that our legislation here in the EU actually creates those guardrails to know what can we do with European data, what can we do, what are the possibilities in terms of data transfer, in terms of data exchange. It's setting those boundaries, again, not shutting the doors and saying we're on our own, but just putting the framework in place to say to hear and no further. Because if you need to comply in another region to a different set of values, that's fair enough, as long as it doesn't impact the data, for example, that is originating in the EU. Or we don't want to see data localization requirements, definitely not. But how can you avoid creating data localization requirements? But what does that actually mean? What is the possibility for data transfer? And those questions are not easy to answer because also the industry, especially the global players, have got so many different contexts to operate in. But it is that they have to be able to be nimble enough to adapt to the local context without impacting the local context in a different region, namely the EU in our situation.
Great, thank you. Anyone else, Vera?
Maybe just to add on that, I think that the regulation that is in place elsewhere, in particular China, let's just name it. I think it's you just said, Siada, that it's really hard to deal with these different sorts of frameworks, and I think that doesn't even begin to cover it because it's so complicated. And I think it's for companies that deal with data that originates in the EU, and they're also active in China. This is an ongoing process that's very, very costly to try to differentiate the two batches of data and try to figure out how to deal with data localization requirements with all the other regulation that's in place in China, and how to protect European consumers, European interests, European data in the process. And I think, and I'm sorry to say that, I think that's not even always possible. I think there are some conflicts that cannot be solved even with the best legislation in Europe. And I think this is something that we'll see more and more, like that China's gonna go even further than what we're seeing now. And I think a lot of all the European players that have no contact, that no business dealings with China, for them it's not an issue, but for all the others it's a major point, because China is such an important market, and at the same time the way data is being collected and used and all of that is so very fundamentally different to our values, and this is going to get worse. And I don't have a solution, I must say. This is something that frustrates me a lot. I've been working on the China topic for a while, but I think there's nothing really that we can do apart from trying to cut back on our China business dealings, which is not really an option either. I mean, I'm not sure, maybe Siada or Federico, you want to jump in here. Do you see differently?
If I could respond to that one really quickly, I think it's pushed the industry that originates from China to try and come up with solutions as well. It means that companies have had to think about how they're structured, where they're headquartered, whether they have different operations in different regions that control their data in separate places, to also allow them enough autonomy to be able to comply. And you see different approaches from the various industry players, but it has actually meant sometimes very intrusive choices for the companies to have to split up the company in different independent structures to be able to comply. But so I don't think it's only left up to the legislators to come up with solutions on that at all. And that's where I think the dialogue is so extremely important as well, because those who want to operate in Europe will have to comply to European standards and European values. So that means that if that's the case, they'll need to make the necessary adaptations to build that trust in their operations, to make it possible to actually comply and not get dragged into the contention between the two different sets of values. But we have seen that already happen, and that transition move. I don't know, Federico, if you've seen the same, it would be interesting to get your views on that as well.
Yeah, I wanted also to introduce the concept that is already in the GDPR and in the other legal instruments that we are preparing, which is the adequacy decisions. also to respond to the issue of meta last initiatives. So again, there what we are saying through the legislation is really we are open for a negotiation. We are open to find a solution, the adequacy decision in these cases, so that our values are respected, but you can do businesses with us. So it's not closing and localizing the data. It's you can transfer the data, you can use your data, but you have to respect our legislation. And there could be technical solution, as Siada was mentioning, or other type of solution that assure us that our values are respected. So we are really building into the legislation that we are proposing this openness. And of course, it's not easy, especially with countries that has been mentioned before, which has got a completely different approach on what is access to data and possibility of using data without the consent also of the data holder or the data producers.
Thank you very much. You certainly made my job a bit easier with interacting with each other. Thank you very much for this. But we have a question which seems to me very interesting, but perhaps surpasses my knowledge of the technology. When it comes to obligations of non-personal data sharing generated from connected objects, in particular Internet of Things, how would you assess the potential consequence that companies might invest less in collecting and generating valuable, high-quality data? How could they be incentivized to keep on doing so? And I see immediately Vera having a hand, so I will try to give her the floor.
Thank you. I did want, Federico, if you want to say something from your perspective first, that's fine as well.
No, I can think about it. So
okay.
You will answer.
Yeah.
Will answer
I think the question is that if companies are mandated to share data that their products generate, they might have an incentive not to be able, not to collect as high quality data as they would otherwise, or they might have an incentive not to collect any data or anything like this. And obviously, I think I'm an economist, so from my perspective, this is what in an ideal world, this is what would happen if you take something away from from the data holder, then the incentive to produce it in the first place is lower. So I think, and this is something that we need to look at closely once the legislation is implemented, if this is really happening, and we need to stop this from happening, because obviously what we want to do is we want high quality data to be shared and to be used by as many as possible. So I think one way to incentivize this is by making people pay for the data in whatever height of payment, but I think money would solve the problem. so to allow this, I'm not sure, I'm not that firm on the current status. Federico can surely say more whether this is part of the current plan.
I don't want to go into the philosophical discussion about whether money can solve everything, but certainly in this context, I'm sure they can, but Federico will know better.
No, I want just to say that it's one of the major questions and that we are trying to tackle with our initiatives. And I cannot say we are going to find the solution, but I wanted just to explain a bit better what we are looking at, and which is, as Dominic was saying, there is quite an interest from companies, for example, to build a connected device so that they can sell and provide additional services to the users. So there is also the interest of the users to have better services for the devices that they are using. But there are some times, and we've got examples, the users would like to have access to that data, and in order to provide it to other third parties that can provide additional services that are not already provided by the producer of the device. So how do we balance the different aspects so that we've got a thriving third parties economy developing services? How do we again make sure that the user of that device can do that, but also that the device producer stays in a sort of sense in control, that the data that is producing and collecting is going not to the competitors? That's the difficult questions that we are trying to answer. Let's see what will come up. I can't say more.
Good luck with that. Good luck to everyone, of course. Okay, we have one last question because we're nearing the end, and then I will give you some time to do some final remarks, and then we will try to watch Sandro's intervention again. Okay, so the question is, do you foresee any developments on EU-US data transfers after Schrems 2? And Federico's already...
No, it's that, yeah, there is some development in the sense that I know that our colleagues are discussing on finding a development and a solution after Schrems 2. But unfortunately, I'm not directly involved, and I don't know at which stage, and probably it will not even be possible to disclose any discussion and negotiation that are happening at this moment. But again, it proves that we are not closed, that Schrems 2 didn't close the door, but it opened a negotiation process within EU and US, and we are trying to find a solution that will be agreed by both parties.
Anyone else has more inside information on this? I don't think so.
I don't think there's anything we can announce on this one. There are no big announcements, no aha moments as such, but I do think that it's going to be an ongoing one. At least that door in terms of the dialogue between the EU and the US is open to find common understanding and agreement. And I think that that's how we will have to see this. I think even if we have the next development, only be a development in a long chain of developments, because the context will continue to change.
Thank you very much. Okay, well, we reached the end of the dialogue part. So I will give you 2 minutes each to sum up the discussion or share with us some final thoughts on the topic. Starting with Vera, then going to Ciara, then to Federico.
Thank you. Yeah, I think the discussion today was very interesting and took a slightly different turn from what I expected we'd be talking about, but nonetheless very, very interesting. And this just shows that the topic of the data economy and the way we're proceeding within the European Union is a really large and complex one, and there's a lot of different aspects that need to be taken into account. In particularly also looking at the geopolitical aspects. This was something that I hadn't counted on as happening as talking about today. I just want to close by saying I think we need to have a positive outlook on things. I think we're doing great things. Not everything's going to work straight away, but that never does. So we just need to give also the Commission some leeway in the way they're setting the legislation. What we need to be doing is closely evaluate how the different acts actually work and what effects they have on companies. So I think this is something that we need to be doing in the next couple of years. And I think we can make Europe a more competitive place and start using data to its full potential by setting the right framework. So that's it from me.
Thank you, Vera. Ciara?
I'm actually going to start where Vera left off, which is let's start with the opportunities that we have and let's give it a chance. I think for the first time, I am one of the dinosaurs who's been in Brussels doing digital policy for 2 decades now. And I think for the first time, we see a commission that is really tackling the big questions, let's give that vision a chance and see how it's going to pan out. Because I think it could be a complete changer for us in terms of digital policy making. We're not looking at the minute details. That will come to complement it, but we're actually trying to create fit for purpose legislation here. Let's give that a chance, because I think the opportunities are immense for the EU, for the economy, and for the European citizens. So cautiously optimistic is where I'd like to leave it, but I think we've got a really good chance here.
Thank you, Siada. Federico, you had a technical problem. Perhaps you missed the praise towards the Commission, so I'm repeating here.
What I want to say, especially for the companies, for the participants that probably are working in companies and organizations, is also to add another aspect. So I think, as everybody said, was very during the discussion, said is that it's a fast-pacing, changing environment, but then you do not have to wait. So there are a number of already initiatives supporting data sharing. There's the Commission that is going to fund a number of initiatives creating data spaces, but there are other organizations like Gaia X that probably many of you knows that they are getting industries joining together and finding also technical solution for data sharing. And there I think that you need, all businesses needs to participate or be aware of what is also technically going to happen in order not to lose the train of the innovation and the business possibility opportunity that can give the use of data, basically.
Thank you very much, Federico. Well, we could go on for another full event only talking about data and cloud providers and what's happening with Gaia and the cloud alliance and so on. So perhaps we do it another time. But I'm taking now the next minute to thank our distinguished speakers. Thank you, Vera. Thank you, Siada. Thank you, Federico. We deeply appreciate you being here and talking with us about this topic. Thanks to the audience, of course. Keep on following the European Liberal Forum. We have more publications, papers, studies on this topic and others that refer to technology and whatever big changes they bring to our lives and to our regulations. And we have the next event on the 24th of February, How Can Tech Revolutionize Agriculture? We have very good speakers as well. You can see the link in the chat. We have Indigo Farming and Arla from the industry, and Irene Trolleret discussing about fascinating developments in the way we farm and the way we use farming also against climate change, which is fantastic to think if you think about it. So also follow the European Liberal Forum on our social media. We're almost everywhere, like everybody else. But let's see if we can see now if Sandro will speak to us. And I also bid you farewell. Ciao, ciao.
I would like to thank you all, and I would like to thank the European Liberal Forum for asking me to share my view on the issue of data economy and the European Union. It is clear that the current COVID crisis exposed Europe's vulnerabilities on both societal and economic level, but also it made the case for increasing our resilience, increasing our strategic autonomy, and work much harder for our global leadership in the digital transition. And from this perspective, certainly data economy is very focal. Europe's best achievement, it is a single market. And the single market is instrumental in achieving these goals, these digital goals, if we adapt it to the objective of the digital transition and to the new needs of the data economy. European strategy on data is strictly linked to this process. We absolutely need a well-functioning and deepened single market without unjustified national barriers for e-commerce. And we also need future-proof rules that provide for legal certainty, for fair competition, that take into account the specific needs of small and medium enterprises and that allow for innovation and growth while ensuring a high level of consumer protection and of consumer trust. We need more than ever a European approach on data governance in order to avoid harmful fragmentation and excessive fragmentation. 90% of the respondents in the consultation on data strategy have underlined that data governance mechanisms are badly needed to capture the huge potential of data, in particular for cross-sector data use. There is a real demand for such approach, and the recently negotiated Data Governance Act, I was one of the negotiators, it is certainly a very good first step forward. European harmonized provisions will contribute to establishing the single market for data by ensuring both emergence and cross-border functioning of new services. We must facilitate the sharing of personal and non-personal data, of course, in compliance with data protection rules, and ensure trust and control of the citizens and of the companies over their data. This is fundamental. We came up with effective regulatory decisions as to sharing of sensitive data, allowing for data altruism, which is a very new concept, very important, and developing data governance structures. The Data Governance Act puts on the table all the relevant elements and is very welcome. It strikes the right balance, in my view, and thanks to DGA, we can optimize the use of digital resources of economy while enhancing both businesses and consumers' trust in data exchange. The Data Governance Act aims to foster the availability of data by increasing trust in data intermediaries and by strengthening data sharing mechanisms across the EU and between the different economics and relevant sectors. It also aims at increasing control and trust of both citizens and companies regarding the data and offer a real alternative, a real European model to data handling and absolutely innovative concerning the major tech platforms. It will ensure access to more data for the EU economy and societies and provide for more control for citizens and companies over the data they generate. For example, people with rare or chronic diseases may want to give permission for their data to be used in order to improve treatments for those diseases. Through personal data spaces, which are novel personal information management tools and services, Europeans, we all, will gain more control over our data, and we will decide on a detailed level who will get access to their data and for what purpose. Businesses, both small and large, will benefit from new business opportunities as well as from a reduction in cost for acquiring, integrating and processing data, from lower barriers to enter markets and from a reduction in time to market for novel products and services. Furthermore, the developing of European data spaces that will allow data from across the EU, both from the public sector and businesses, to be exchanged in a trustworthy manner and at a lower cost, thereby boosting the developing of new data-driven products and services, will create an alternative to the platform model currently led by the big tech companies, non-European big tech companies. Are our businesses and citizens ready for digital transition and for a real data economy? I truly believe they are, as long as they have the courage to see the opportunities that a change could offer. We, as policy makers, we should step up our efforts to create a regulatory environment that attracts businesses, research and innovation, academic excellence and future-proof investments, with rules that ensure fair competition between and equal treatment of both EU and non-EU economic players, with rules that create opportunities to innovate for our businesses and trust for our consumers, with regulatory initiatives such as the new legislation on data governance, on the digital services, on the digital market. We are on the right path to make Europe a global leader in digital transition and data economy. Thank you very much.